Germany built one of history's most systematic machines for plunder, but the fortune they accumulated during World War II, estimated at over $600 million in gold alone, worth more than $8 billion today, never fully surfaced after the war. The majority simply vanished. Some was recovered, much was not. And what disappeared became the subject of myth, desperation, and 50 years of unanswered questions. Before we go deeper into how billions in stolen wealth disappeared into the shadows of history, make sure to subscribe for more history that actually happened. By 1939, Nazi Germany was broke. Years of rearmament had drained the Reich's gold and foreign exchange reserves to unsustainable levels. Germany had defaulted on foreign loans. Most trade relied on barter. The regime could not afford to deplete what little remained to procure machinery, parts, tungsten, oil, the essentials of total war. But Adolf Hitler's regime discovered another method: theft. Not opportunistic looting, but industrial-scale confiscation executed with bureaucratic precision. What began as the seizure of Austria's gold reserves in 1938 evolved into a Continental plunder operation that would strip the central banks of occupied Europe, the safe deposit boxes of Jewish families, and eventually the dental fillings of concentration camp victims. Nazi Germany's war economy was financed, in substantial part, by robbery. It started with annexation. When Germany absorbed Austria in March 1938, it seized the Austrian National Bank's gold reserves outright. Czechoslovakia followed in 1939. The Free City of Danzig was next. These three sources alone boosted German official gold reserves by an estimated $71 million between 1937 and 1939. To mask the acquisition, the Reichsbank understated its reserves by $40 million relative to Bank of England estimates. The theft had begun, but the world was not yet paying attention. Once the war began in earnest, the system expanded. As Wehrmacht forces rolled through Europe, SS units and Reichsbank officials followed close behind. Belgium lost $223 million in gold. The Netherlands lost $193 million. France, Luxembourg, Italy, Yugoslavia, nation after nation, saw their monetary reserves seized and trucked back to Berlin. The total value of looted monetary gold alone exceeded $550 million. But that was only what could be counted. Gold jewelry, art, securities, diamonds, and other assets stolen from private citizens and companies never entered any ledger. The total value remains uncertain to this day. In Berlin, the plundered gold poured into the vaults of the Reichsbank. But by late 1944, Allied bombers were systematically destroying the German capital. On February 3, 1945, 937 B-17 bombers of the 8th Air Force dropped nearly 2,300 tons of bombs on Berlin, obliterating much of the Reichsbank itself, including its currency printing presses. Reichsbank President Walter Funk, who would later be convicted at Nuremberg for his role in financing the SS and accepting gold stolen from concentration camp victims, made a decision. The Reich's remaining wealth would be dispersed. Most of it would go to a potassium mine at Merkers, about 200 miles southwest of Berlin, deep beneath the earth where no bomb could reach it. On February 11, 1945, a train departed Berlin carrying the Reich's monetary reserves. Inside the rail cars, gold bars, bags of gold and silver coins, 1 billion Reichsmarks bundled in 1,000 sacks, substantial quantities of foreign currency, and something else. 189 suitcases, trunks, and boxes packed with jewelry, dental gold, cigarette cases, and flattened silver objects marked with a single name, Melmer. These were the proceeds of the SS's concentration camp looting operation. From August 1942 until January 1945, SS Captain Bruno Melmer had made 76 deliveries to the Reichsbank of property seized from concentration camp victims. Proceeds were credited to an account codenamed Max Heiliger, a pseudonym for Heinrich Himmler and his SS. By March 1945, much of this loot had been processed, but a significant amount remained. It was loaded onto the train to Merkers. Once it arrived, the entire shipment was unloaded into a specially designated vault area in the mine, room number 8. Meanwhile, to protect Germany's art treasures, the Reich Minister for Education ordered museum holdings shipped to mines for safekeeping. Between March 20th and March 31st, the Germans transported 1/4 of the major holdings of 14 principal Prussian state museums to Merkers. Dr. Paul Ortwin Rave, curator of the German State Museum in Berlin, was ordered to remain at Merkers and watch over the collection. By early April, as Lieutenant General George Patton's Third Army cut northeast from Frankfurt, Reichsbank officials attempted to remove the reserves back to Berlin. But the speed of the American advance and the partial shutdown of Germany's railway system made evacuation impossible. On April 2nd, bank officials received orders to retrieve only the Reichsmarks, which were in short supply elsewhere in the crumbling Reich. Director Fromknecht, head cashier Otto Reimer, Foreign Notes Chief Werner Feich, and cashier Albert Toms arrived at Merkers. With the help of Polish workers, they loaded about 200 million Reichsmarks and 50 packages of foreign currency onto a truck. One load made it out. But on the evening of April 3rd, they learned the Americans were approaching. A railway bridge was destroyed. The currency train could not pass. The money was brought back to Merkers. They decided to return it to the mine, but before they could finish, American soldiers arrived. On the morning of April 6, 1945, 2 military policemen, Private First Class Clyde Harmon and Private First Class Anthony Klein, stopped 2 women on a road outside Merkers. One was pregnant. They were French displaced persons seeking a midwife. The MPs drove them back into town. As they passed the entrance to the Kaiser Road assault mine, the driver asked what sort of mine it was. The women said it was the mine where the German gold reserve and valuable artworks had been deposited several weeks before. By noon, the story had reached Lieutenant Colonel William A. Russell, the 91st Infantry Division's civilian affairs officer. He proceeded to the mine. Interviews with displaced persons confirmed it. A British sergeant who had been employed as a prisoner of war confirmed he had helped unload the gold. Russell also found Dr. Rave, who admitted he was caring for paintings. Werner Feich, the Reichsbank cashier, confirmed the gold in the mine constituted the entire reserve of the Reichsbank in Berlin. Russell requested the 712th Tank Battalion to guard the mine entrances. Elements of the 91st Division Military Police were deployed. Arrangements were made to generate power so the shafts could be entered the next morning. That evening, Major General Herbert L. Ernest, commanding general of the 90th Infantry Division, called for reinforcements. By evening's end, anticipation ran high. If they had indeed captured the Reich's monetary reserve, the war might end sooner. On the morning of April 7th, engineers blasted a hole through a 3-foot-thick brick wall, sealing the main vault. Behind it, a cavern 75 feet wide, 150 feet long, with a 12-foot ceiling. More than 7,000 bags, stacked knee-high in 20 rows, stretched to the back. All were marked and sealed. Gold bags bore Reichsbank stamps. Baled currency was stacked along one side. At the back, 18 bags and 189 suitcases, trunks, and boxes, each bearing a packing slip and a tag with the name Melmer. A partial inventory was made. The contents: 8,198 bars of gold bullion, 55 boxes of crated gold bullion, hundreds of bags of gold items, over 1,300 bags of gold Reichsmarks, British gold pounds, and French gold francs, 711 bags of American $20 gold pieces, hundreds of bags of gold and silver coins, hundreds of bags of foreign currency, 9 bags of valuable coins, 2,380 bags, and 1,300 boxes containing 2.76 billion Reichsmarks, 20 silver bars, 40 bags containing silver bars, 63 boxes and 55 bags of silver plate, one bag containing 6 platinum bars, and 110 bags from various countries. On April 12th, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, General Omar Bradley, and General Patton descended into the mine. Looking at the single cable suspending the elevator as it dropped 2,100 feet into darkness, Patton remarked that if it snapped, promotions in the United States Army would be considerably stimulated. Eisenhower told him to stop. Once inside room number 8, the generals inspected the captured gold. They examined the SS loot. Eisenhower was moved. Crammed into suitcases and trunks was a great amount of gold and silver plate, an ornament obviously looted from private dwellings throughout Europe, he later wrote. All the articles had been flattened by hammer blows, obviously to save storage space. Patton noted suitcases filled with jewelry, cigarette cases, wristwatch cases, vases, gold-filled teeth, and false teeth acquired by bandit methods. The inspection concluded after 1 hour. That night, Eisenhower, Bradley, and Patton dined together. Just before midnight, they learned President Roosevelt had died. Over the next several days, the treasure was removed from the mine. Working non-stop, soldiers loaded over 11,000 containers onto 32 10-ton trucks. The convoy, codenamed Task Force Whitney, departed Merkers on April 15th, escorted by infantry, military police, machine gun platoons, anti-aircraft guns, wreckers, an ambulance, and air cover of observation planes, and P-51 Mustang fighters. It arrived at the Reichsbank building in Frankfurt that afternoon. Unloading commenced at 3:45 p.m. and concluded after midnight. 2 infantry companies cordoned off the bank. The treasure was secured. The discovery at Merkers was extraordinary. But it was not the whole story. It was not even half. Throughout the war, but especially toward the end, Nazi officials and German industrialists transferred vast sums to neutral countries, primarily Switzerland. According to declassified U.S. intelligence documents from Operation Safe Haven, the Germans succeeded in seizing $587 million in gold, of which $402 million was shipped to or through Switzerland. This was money laundering on an unprecedented scale. Swiss banks accepted gold directly from the Reichsbank throughout the war, even when other neutral nations refused. A 1998 investigation led by U.S. diplomat Stuart Eisenstadt estimated that the Swiss National Bank received $440 million in Nazi gold, over half of which, $316 million, was looted. The Bergier Commission, a Swiss historical inquiry, confirmed that the Swiss National Bank's governing board knew early on that the gold was looted. Switzerland also facilitated transactions with Portugal, Spain, Sweden, and Turkey, laundering an additional $240 million. When the war ended, the Allies demanded restitution, but Switzerland resisted. Negotiations dragged on for years. Eventually, under the Washington Agreement of 1946, Switzerland agreed to pay $60 million, roughly 12% of the value of the gold it had received. That sum was transferred to the Allied Tripartite Gold Commission, which returned monetary gold to the central banks from which it had been looted. The rest remained in Swiss vaults, enriching Swiss financial institutions. Switzerland was rewarded, not punished, for its cozy relations with Nazi Germany. But even that $60 million was not distributed to victims. Much of it sat untouched. 2 tons of gold from the Swiss settlement remained in the vaults of the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank in New York for nearly 50 years. 3 tons sat in the Bank of England. Together, some $65 million that should have been returned to Holocaust victims and their heirs was never distributed. Meanwhile, individual accounts opened by Jewish families before the war remained dormant. Many Jews had deposited money in Swiss banks to protect their assets from Nazi confiscation. Swiss banking secrecy laws, strengthened in 1934, guaranteed anonymity. But when the depositors and their families perished in the Holocaust, Their accounts were absorbed by the banks. After the war, survivors attempting to reclaim assets were ensnared in bureaucracy. Swiss banks demanded death certificates, account numbers, and documentation that concentration camp survivors could not possibly provide. In 1962, Switzerland passed a law requiring banks to identify dormant accounts. But there was no independent oversight. Banks determined for themselves which accounts qualified. Only $7.5 million in 961 accounts was turned over to claimants. Safe deposit boxes were excluded. Corporate accounts were excluded. Accounts from Eastern Europe, where most Holocaust victims originated, were excluded. Some accounts were used to settle Swiss claims against communist regimes in Poland and other Eastern European countries that had nationalized Swiss-owned property. Switzerland simply transferred the proceeds of dormant Jewish accounts to Swiss businessmen. This arrangement was debated in the Swiss parliament but was vigorously denied by the Swiss Foreign Ministry until detailed documentation surfaced decades later. In 1995, the World Jewish Congress began pressing Switzerland to address the issue. Under mounting international pressure, Swiss banks admitted they still held accounts belonging to Holocaust victims. In 1996, the Swiss Bankers Association announced it had discovered $32 million in dormant accounts. That figure was immediately disputed. Independent researchers estimated the true figure was several $100 million, possibly more. In May 1996, Swiss banking officials signed an agreement with the World Jewish Congress and the World Jewish Restitution Organization to establish the Independent Committee of Eminent Persons, chaired by former U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker. The Volcker Committee conducted a thorough audit. Its work was completed in 1998. Swiss banks eventually agreed to a $1.25 billion settlement with Holocaust survivors and their heirs, but even that settlement represented only a fraction of what had been stolen, hidden, and never returned. Then there are the legends, the stories that never went away. The Nazi gold train supposedly buried in tunnels near Wałbrzych, Poland. The legend persisted for decades. In 2015, 2 men claimed they had located it using ground-penetrating radar. Polish authorities granted permission to dig. International media descended on the site. Treasure hunters began excavation. They found nothing. Scientists from Krakow University of Science and Technology confirmed in December 2015 there was no train. Lake Toplitz in Austria became another focal point. Rumors persisted that SS officers dumped crates filled with gold into its dark waters in the final days of the war. The lake is deep, cold, and treacherous. Its waters taper into lateral cave systems, making exploration difficult and dangerous. Multiple diving expeditions were launched over decades. In the 1950s, divers recovered wooden crates. Inside, millions of counterfeit British pounds produced under Operation Bernhard, a Nazi counterfeiting scheme designed to destabilize the British economy. No gold was found. One diver died in a 1963 expedition. Another died in 1983. Experts concluded that if gold had been dumped in Lake Toplitz, it likely remains inaccessible, buried in silt or trapped in submerged caves. There were other caches. In November 1944, German industrialists representing some of Germany's largest firms met at the Maison Rouge Hotel in Strasbourg. SS Obergruppenführer Dr. Scheid presided. He told them German industry must prepare for a post-war commercial campaign. They were instructed to smuggle over $100 million in gold bullion to Switzerland and other neutral countries to finance what some called the foundation of a Fourth Reich. Some of that gold was never recovered. SS Chief Heinrich Himmler also succeeded in smuggling plundered property to Switzerland in the final weeks of the war. The whereabouts of this trove have never been established. Reichsbank officials, Nazi party leaders, and SS officers fled Germany with fortunes hidden in suitcases, in false-bottom trunks, in the holds of U-boats. Foreign Minister Joachim von Ribbentrop smuggled 15 tons of gold out of Berlin before the city's fall. 6.5 tons was surrendered to U.S. forces. 2 tons ended up with British forces in Schleswig-Holstein. The rest was smuggled to Sweden, Portugal, Spain, Turkey, and Switzerland. Only a portion was ever recovered. Decades after the war, investigations revealed that Spanish border towns, Portuguese tungsten dealers, Turkish intermediaries, and Swedish bankers all profited from Nazi gold. Some of it was sold, melted down, and recast into bars with new stamps, erasing its origins. Much of it entered the global financial system, indistinguishable from legitimate gold. Art dealers trafficked in paintings and sculptures stolen from Jewish families. Swiss firms like Bally, the celebrated shoe company, acquired shops in Germany confiscated from Jews. Diamonds stolen from over 1,000 Belgian firms were sold to Swiss and Spanish dealers. Britain's chief investigator of looted art produced damning reports on Swiss dealers, but no prosecutions followed. Not everyone was complicit, but almost no one escaped unscathed. Even Allied governments proved indifferent to returning assets to Jewish victims. As World Jewish Congress President Edgar Bronfman noted in the 1990s, everyone was blithe about Jewish property. It wasn't just the Swiss. That was the attitude of everyone, the Americans, the English, the French. It was as if they were saying, "The Jews are dead, so to hell with them." In recent decades, governments have reopened investigations. Files have been declassified. Commissions have been established. Some restitution has been made, but vast sums remain unaccounted for. The gold that disappeared in 1945 did not simply vanish. It was hidden, laundered, melted, sold, and absorbed into the financial systems of neutral nations and post-war economies. Some sits in numbered accounts that will never be claimed. Some rests in vaults whose contents are protected by secrecy laws. Some lies at the bottom of Austrian lakes or buried in Polish forests, real or imagined. And some, perhaps most, enriched those who facilitated its concealment and profited from its theft. The Nazi regime built a machine of plunder unmatched in history, but the machinery did not stop when the regime fell. It continued quietly in the form of bureaucratic obstruction, legal technicalities, and willful ignorance. 50 years passed before Switzerland admitted culpability. 80 years later, the full accounting has still not been made. The gold that was never found was not lost. It was kept. And the question is not where it went, but who allowed it to stay hidden. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Word count, 4,004 words.